Dr. Samani, thank you for having us here. Our intent is just to share a little bit of a perspective of what we are doing to work with you good folks in protecting our water resources now and into the future. Okay, as Dr. King pointed out earlier, I applaud the action items. It's to plan for the drought, and that's for surface water, groundwater, and the system in totality. Okay, the Rio Grande project. You good folks know this much better than I do. Okay, my background is I'm from a small ranch southeast of Alamosa, Colorado. I frankly understand to a measure irrigation of hay fields, alfalfa, and potatoes. There are no pecan trees in the San Luis Valley. So thank you. Part of this is for me to listen and to learn from you folks, all right? The project itself, as you again know better than I do, but just for a little bit of foundation, is we have this, it's a federal project that we capitalize the storage in Elephant Butte and Caballo reservoirs to serve about 170,000 acres in the United States, plus meet our delivery obligations to our neighbor to the south, the Republic of Mexico. The foundational law of this, of course, is the Rio Grande Compact. Now, according to that, it has the allocations for the project. The historic allocations were based upon irrigated acres. There were no, the federal project was designed to use federal funds, if you will, to construct this water delivery and storage conveyance system because the farmers, frankly, proactively got together to maximize their ability to deliver limited, very limited water supplies in the most efficient manner, but create a mechanism to repay the government for those expenditures. The allocation was based upon an equal amount of water per irrigated acre. There were no distinctions between artificial state boundaries. And again, think of it from the federal perspective. It was on the line of, look, we can't make a distinction between whether you're a citizen of New Mexico or Texas. People should be treated equally. That's how the allocation system was set up. What you see here is the distinctions of 57% to EBID, 43% to El Paso, Improvement District number 1. That was based upon irrigated acreage. There was just more land in New Mexico. So that's where the 57% came from. Okay? There's a 2008 operating agreement. It was developed in negotiations amongst the leaders of the irrigation districts, El Paso number 1, as well as Elephant Butte, and also the Bureau of Reclamation. These folks operated in pure good faith to try to deal with some long-standing issues. And it's easy to do the Monday morning quarterback type scenario. But please understand, Dr. King was I really enjoyed his graphs this morning that showed the dynamic nature of trying to manage an evolving river system in a highly arid state. Okay? Where I'm from, I'm used to 7 inches of precipitation a year. So I have, again, a measure of understanding of that. When you see the dynamics of how it changes per year, over time, those trends can be significant in protecting our water resources today, but also for future generations. And you can also just appreciate, as he said this morning, from January to February, if I recall correctly, it's going from an 86 to a 70% reduction. That shows the volatility that the leadership down here is trying to manage with their colleagues on a daily basis. So that's much appreciated and valued. But it's complex. To say, again, I'm really saying something innovative here. It's a very complex system. The challenge to this, though, in the operating agreement, through years of attempts to work with the federal government on this, was that the new creation of the 2008 operating agreement, in contrast to historic operations, wouldn't change the allocations. It wouldn't cause a distinguished or marked impact to New Mexico water users. However, we find that that's not from a factually based, using reclamation, accounting, measurement, and their numbers. That's not been the case. This graph illustrates what those impacts are. Okay, I need to spend just a little bit of time on this. Again, think in context, if you will, of Dr. King's graph that showed over time, from the 50s to the 70s, a drier period. If you recall that period, sure, there was year-to-year volatility, but the overall trend during that time period was a lower water year. In the 80s and the 90s, we were blessed with more bountiful water supplies. I found out during lunch that when I was a hydrographer in the San Luis Valley, I was crossing paths with Dr. Samani, doing other good work in the San Luis Valley at that time. So I understand we were blessed with high water years. That is important, and I'm going to ask you to place that as a footnote, the significance that has in the hydrologic cycle. And then we have the dry period that we have now. When you have, for those that may not be able to see it in the back, on the x-axis we have a period of time from 1996 to 2011. The white bars signify the allocation, how much was targeted, if you will, for Elton Butte Irrigation District versus El Paso number 1 for those periods of time. The light green is El Paso number 1. Under full water supply years, 495,000 acre feet to Elton Butte Irrigation District. Okay? You can see when that occurred during those bountiful years. But we also had good years later on. What we're seeing now is in the same full project, post implementation of the 2008 operating agreement, as we were working through that transition that Dr. King spoke of starting in 2006, under good water years, if you will, we've got a 175,000 acre foot drop in the allocation to New Mexico water users. Okay, that's the allocation. What does that really mean in terms of deliveries? Where the rubber meets the road, if you will. You can see that declination of about 169,000 acre feet difference in these two time periods, signified as pre and post operating agreement. So folks, that's a little bit why we're here. It's going back to that first bullet. It's planning for drought, managing our water resources with you folks. This graphic describes the change. Under historic allocations and procedures, El Paso received 43%. New Mexico, 57%. That has changed. El Paso received 81% in 2011 versus 19. Okay? So what are the impacts? How does this affect the communities and so forth? First of all, we have that decrease of between 150 and 175,000 acre feet. It's a rather large number. What that has caused, and I think that's the focus of today, it's increased groundwater pumping. I mean, it's again, the resource of the aquifer is a tool to be used and managed. The key word, however, is sustainability. I mean, I do understand the idea of buying seed in November and December and the expenditure that goes into that and planning and making mortgage payments per year. But is it not just as important to think in the future as well? And that's simply what we're trying to do, is share the state's perspective on that. I have with me folks from the Attorney General's office as well as the State Engineer's office, so we can address those questions individually or collectively as you describe, sir, or as you dictate, pardon me. So this is where we're at. That's how much. We have increased groundwater pumping. Is it sustainable? No. No. I've had the challenge of working in other river basins where this has occurred. If the train whistle is being heard, the light is coming on and the vibration of the rails are occurring, maybe we ought to pay attention to that. So what does that loss of water do? This just gives you an idea. It goes into the water planning. It's critical to meeting our community, our agricultural needs. for the businesses, the commercial enterprises, the churches, the schools, the municipalities. This is a rather busy diagram. I'm sure, again, this is nothing new to you folks. This describes the conceptual water budget, which you must address if you're going to have cognizant water planning to all the inputs and outputs of a water cycle. You have the natural precipitation, etc. But let's again recognize you folks live here. These are your farms. I'm just going to focus a little bit on this area. We talked about this morning 6 inches of water being allocated, surface water, okay? How much is that going to be applied for crop evapotranspiration? How much is going to go in the soil layer? My concern is this aquifer level. One of the first comments I heard this morning was the declination last year of the lowering of the water table. How much more? Salinity is also an issue. But it's this part that we have grave concern about. How much is going into deep percolation? Will 6 inches go beyond that soil moisture profile? Will it aid to the aquifer? Will it recharge like it did in the 80s? That's why you capture those high water years. Okay, again, there's nothing innovative about that. We all know that. But it's that decreasing aquifer level that's of grave concern. Here, this graphic is illustrative of the United States Geological Survey groundwater monitoring well over time from 1990 to essentially the present. This is a well located about halfway between Mesquite and Las Cruces, between the river and the highway. What's of concern is, yes, you have a period of wet and dry years. It's frankly relatively stable. In terms of its use from irrigation, consumptive demand from downstream cities, all other water users. We're seeing a declination as drought occurs. What's alarming is this steep decline. How low before wells start to cavitate? How low until it starts impacting water quality issues? I don't know that. I don't know that. But my concern is when we have no recharge coming in, now or in the foreseeable future, to replenish that aquifer that bounced back as a result of the operating agreement, where will this plateau? So, here's again why we're here. What's the value of this? I mean, as Professor Skaggs talked about, as the economics, if you will. This is the range. I can't tell you with absolute certainty what the value is, but based upon current market values of water, large-scale water transfers per acre foot, this is the direct impact. What's also of concern is this is the direct impact of the water. When you have this type of thing, it goes under secondary and tertiary impacts. People aren't having the water supplies. It affects yields, which means there's not as many shoes purchased at the local JCPenney's. It impacts banking loans. It can have a cascading effect. And by the way, this has unfortunately occurred in other river basins. So it's our chance to learn and to perhaps change. So it does cascade. How much water? There's one tool, if you will. It's enough to irrigate 50,000 acres or serve communities of Las Cruces and New Mexico State University for 5 years. It is not a question of ag versus municipal. This is a shared resource. What this is saying is this will just heighten the competitiveness in the future. So it's just trying to make more to do with a smaller or shrinking pie. So what are our goals? Why are we here? In addition to trying to share this factual information, you're making planning, you're making business decisions on a daily basis. We recognize that. what we're attempting to do through litigation that followed years of attempts to work with reclamation to rectify this that were unheeded. So unfortunately, let's not shy away from that. Sometimes litigation is necessary to get the federal government's attention. Unfortunately, and I choose that word carefully, unfortunately it was necessary. But it's to regain our rightful share of water resources. Also, to get that recharge coming back in. We are looking at a drier year again. It's nothing new to southern New Mexico. But when we have those good years, should we not be able to bank the water just as anyone else does through that recharge? And our plea, frankly, is to work with you folks to come up with these solutions. Yes, there is litigation, but that does not mean doors are closed. We want to hear from you. We want to work with you. We will pursue that. We will protect New Mexico's water resources. So try to help save a little bit of time and go through this and open it up for discussion and questions. Pablo, thank you. I learned more from you in a very quick 45 minutes, but